Episode 42, A Shattered Empire. Grand General Sheldon closed his eyes and leaned back on his chair. Around him, his fellows in Kupa High Command looked at each other with concern.
"I'll admit, it isn't looking good, men."
It felt terrible to say it, Sheldon knew. Ever since he had first enrolled in military school when he was 15, he had given his life for the Kupa troop. But facts were facts. With the destruction of more than half of their warships by the Neo-Empire's subterfuge, they were now outnumbered. What was worse, Ludwig was constantly developing new technology which would give his army a huge advantage.
"Emperor Bowser must join the fight,"
Goombas boomed, his voice echoing through the council chamber. His white mustache bristled as he spoke.
"The Kupa Central Elite Force can change this war."
Sheldon opened his eyes and leaned forward.
"If I could, I'd order them out right now,"
he admitted.
"But rules are rules. The Elite Force only moves when the Emperor says it does. If Emperor Bowser would just get back to normal,"
Paraplunk said, shaking his head.
"He'll be turning 50 soon and we're going to have all the usual celebrations, yet he hasn't been seen by the public for years. He's in a bad place, both physically and mentally,"
Sheldon admitted.
"If he would abdicate and put Junior on the throne, we'd stand a better chance, but somebody as stubborn as him will probably die on that chair."
The other generals nodded. Only a few of them were seated around the table. Many members of High Command were out fighting in the field under the command of the Kupalings, and General Locky Thunder had lost his life when his flagship blew up during the destruction of the fleet. The empire they had worked so hard to build up seemed to be crumbling down as they spoke. But Sheldon was determined to keep fighting until the last man. That was his duty as a soldier of the Kupa troop. Corporal Blue Shell sat on a comfortable leather seat, the sounds of conversation and the clinking of cutlery around him. He was in the Lakitu's Roost, one of the fanciest restaurants in Kupa Central. All around him, well-dressed Kupas dined while a Monty Mole bartender whipped up luxurious drinks at his bar lit by red light. The Lakitu's Roost was located on the top floor of a skyscraper, with a massive window wrapping around it. Glancing out, Blue Shell could see the neon light and billboard-covered skyscrapers of Kupa Central around him, displaying the emblem of the Kupa Empire and war propaganda. The enormous imperial citadel loomed over the city, its towers stretching higher than any of the skyscrapers and its huge spiked dome larger than a city block. Blue Shell was eating steak drenched in one-up mushroom gravy, and it was finer dining than he had ever experienced before. That was one of the benefits of being General Flame's secretary. The general had expensive tastes. If it weren't for the chance to eat at places like this from time to time, though, Blue Shell probably would have cracked. Flame was not exactly the most enjoyable person to be around. Flame hadn't eaten anything since they had got there, although he had drunk a lot. The general was down in the dumps. After his failure to retake Toad Town, he had lost the respect of all of his colleagues. There was even talk that he could be kicked off High Command.
"Those idiots don't know what they're missing out,"
Flame ranted, taking another sip of his Fair Outpost brewed vodka.
"If it weren't for me, Neo Bowser City would be a frozen wasteland. Everyone else on the council had been beat by Mario before, or else were lucky enough to have never met him. How should I be any different?"
Blue Shell had a number of things to say, even though it was true that they probably couldn't have defeated Luigi. With better strategy they could have razed Toad Town to the ground. It was Flame's arrogance and bravado that had caused them to lose. And that wasn't even counting the fact that Flame could have crushed the resistance ages ago if he had just listened to him when he had first come to Mushroom City. However, speaking the truth could get you nowhere when you were with Fortuga's Flame. So, instead he said,
It's a great tragedy, General. The Koopa troop really isn't what it once was.
Blue Shell took another bite of his steak. It really was quite delicious.
Ah, quite true, quite true.
Flame agreed, taking a long draught of his vodka.
Some people just don't have the eye to spot the one gold coin in the hill of pennies, wouldn't you say? Quite so, General.
Blue Shell agreed.
You are one exceptional Koopa. If you were sitting at the head of that table instead of Sheldon, this war would be over. I know.
Flame agreed.
Blue Shell, you catch on quickly. But alas.
He sighed overdramatically.
I am underappreciated, underused, and looked down upon by my peers. I have half a mind to quit, you know, and take my talents elsewhere.
Blue Shell hadn't really been paying attention to the conversation. His mind was on his steak and his beautiful girlfriend Shelley, who lived in his Koopa Kingdom hometown of Shell Shock Point. They hadn't seen each other for a year since he had been dispatched to the Mushroom Kingdom, before the war had even began. But now he perked up, his heart beating.
Is this treason, General?
Flame was stupid, that much was obvious, but announcing an intention to join the Neo-Empire in a high-class Koopa Central restaurant full of politicians and high-ranking officers was taking that word to a whole new meaning.
Goodness me, no.
Flame replied, leaning back and crossing one leg over the other.
Do you really think a narcissist like Prince Ludwig would pay attention to me? No, I've got other plans. I've been doing a bit of research. How do you think Ludwig von Koopa managed to launch his rebellion on the first place? Sure, he had Larry and Roy with him, and all their fleets, and I'm sure he's been cooking up weapons in lab for years, but how would he get the resources to build all of them?
Blue Shell shrugged.
He's a prince.
He replied.
Princes are supposed to be rich, aren't they? Oh, I don't doubt that.
Flame replied, taking a sip of his vodka.
But High Command keeps track of certain things. We'd know if he had ordered tons of weapons, especially strange ones. There are even rumors that he's using shroom technology, did you know that? He didn't go through legitimate channels, of that I assure you. And thanks to my painstaking studies of our documents, I've come to discover who he bought them from. And who would that be?
Blue Shell replied. He finished his steak and glanced around the restaurant, hoping to catch the eye of a waiter. His tasty tonic was nearly done and it took many drinks to get him through a prolonged conversation with General Flame. Flame leaned forward.
It's called 7 stars.
He said. There was a dangerous twinkle in his eye, the twinkle Blue Shell had come to realize he always got when he was getting an especially bad idea.
Even High Command don't have much data on them. Think of them as the criminal underworld's secret rulers. Every organization, the Pianta Syndicate, the Robo Gang, Captain Syrup's crew, you name it, they're all indebted to it in some way.
Flame took another sip.
Of course, even these gangs don't know much about 7 stars. Its members all dress in uniform and its public leader is a Magic Koopa whose name is Krizina the Golden, who is often referred to as the
Yellow Star.
It is known, however, that she is only one member of their board of directors, and that there are others who are above her in the organization. Very interesting.
Blue Shell replied, while nodding in the direction of a Parabones waiter, who was crisply dressed in a bow tie.
How is this relevant to you? Simple.
Flame smirked.
I'm going to join them.
Blue Shell narrowed his eyes.
What?
He said. Good old Flame, he never failed to come up with new ways to be incredibly stupid. Lord Frederick of the Snowmats must have been a complete imbecile, letting his army get wiped out by this guy.
You want to sign up with some kind of mafia? Well, it's not a mafia, per se.
Flame said, downing the last few gulps of his vodka.
It's more of a rogue military and intelligence group, actually. But yes, I want to join it. Think about it, Blue Shell. These are the people who backed Ludwig. Without them, those whole stupid war would never have happened. If I can get myself a seat at the high table, then I'll be sitting on the top regardless of if Junior or Ludwig or even Luigi wins the war. In other words.
He snapped his fingers, creating a spark of flame.
You might have to start calling me King Flame. Dead Flame, more likely.
Blue Shell thought, but naturally he didn't say that. He didn't want to lose his ability to dine at places like the Lakitu's Roost and get shipped off to the war zone, after all.
Well, I wish you luck, General.
He said politely.
You're too kind.
Flame smiled. The Parabones waiter flew over, and Blue Shell quickly ordered a refill, as did Flame.
How about we drink to my future?
He suggested when the drinks arrived.
Of course.
Blue Shell replied, raising his glass. As the sweet, strong, bubbly tasty tonic touched Blue Shell's lips, however, he wasn't thinking about 7 stars at all. Fine dining was good and all, but it tasted much better when you earned it yourself instead of coasting off the favors of a man he hated. Perhaps once he returned to the Imperial Citadel he'd report Flame to another one of the generals, and spill the whole story about how he attempted to warn him about Luigi. Perhaps he'd even get a chance at promotion himself. If an idiot like Fortuga's Flame could climb the ranks, so could he. Kami Koopa flew through the midnight sky, piercing through a cloud on her broom. Up above, the stars sparkled, a brilliant canvas of light that covered the midnight sky. High up in the sky, the stars were always beautiful, and Kami could even make out several constellations. She wondered if the star spirits were looking down on her. They probably didn't wish her anything good. The time when she and Lord Bowser had raided Star Haven had been one of their most risky schemes, but it brought back good memories. Back then Bowser had been a foul-mouthed, blustering bully, but at least that was better than the derelict and depressed husk he had become now. The sound of him roaring and calling her an ugly old hag when she pointed out the flaws in his schemes would be music to her ears now. Up ahead, the golden lights of Toad Town shone, illuminating the Toad houses and the towers of Peach's castle. The sight prompted a smile from Kami. It really did look just like it had, back in the old days. Sure, she had hated everyone in that stinking town, but just seeing those obnoxiously merry Toad houses made her feel like a wicked witch again, not an old woman with a bad back on a desperate quest to help her king get his life back. Sure, Bowser had won, but was it really much of a victory? If only he could have settled down and married some nice Koopa girl instead of being so fixated on Princess Peach. Those little escapades into the Mushroom Kingdom had been quite enjoyable, but he should have been able to see that the princess' heart had always been with Mario. Kami flew over the multicolored roofs, and the streets lit by the mushroom-shaped streetlights. There were a few toads hanging about, so Kami stayed high up. Even though it was nearly impossible she'd be recognized, her mission was too important to risk discovery. Kami glanced down. There was a gang of toads seated on a porch of a toad house, drinks in hand, while a brown-capped toad recounted a dramatic story. These toads want their life back, she thought, and really, us Koopas want that too. An empire this large has none of the Koopa Kingdom's charm. Kami looked ahead, way up at the tallest tower of Peach's castle. She urged her broom forward. The night air was cool upon her wrinkled skin and some laughter floated up from the Toad house as Kami flew away. Many people didn't know this fact, but the roof of Peach's castle's tallest tower could actually retract, providing the perfect place to look over the city. Princess Peach rarely used this feature, and it had only been done one time Kami could remember. when Peach's castle had come under the control of the mad genius Fawful. There, up on the highest point of the castle, King Bowser himself had dueled an entity of pure evil who had taken his own form. The Dark Star. Cammy smiled as she approached the roof. Its red tiles seemed to catch some of the starlight. The Dark Star. Any self-respecting Magic Koopa would have loved to have got their hands on it. That stupid Fawful, with all of his science and gadgets, would never have been able to harness its true might. Sadly, nobody would be able to do that now, as it had been destroyed. However, completely. Destroying something like that was a more complicated matter, one that could not be simply done with jumps and fire breath. Cammy closed her eyes and stretched out her wand. The tip began to glow as dark purple particles popped into existence like fireflies. It was a simple process, over in about a minute. Stored within Cammy's wand now was all that remained of the Dark Star. A little less than a quarter of its original power, she estimated, but that would be more than enough. With a satisfied smile, she turned around and urged her broom upwards. Back in the Koopa Kingdom, her research had proved a resounding success. With the aid of her magic, she now knew the exact manner of the Koopa Kingdom's lost queen's death. When Bowser learned of it, well, perhaps his desire for revenge would be enough to shock him out of his depression and, more importantly, help him remember the real love of his life. Perhaps he'd finally be able to get over Princess Peach. Still, though, Cammy was worried. Antonio, the scourge of the Koopa Kingdom and the most powerful fighter the world had ever seen, a man who not even the infamously powerful Morton Koopa Sr. could defeat, was alive, and plotting against them. What his plans were, Cammy couldn't guess, but they concerned Bowser, his family, and even the heroes of the Mushroom Kingdom. Were they even really in control of their own lives, or were they just pawns in Antonio's game? Cammy tightened her grip on her broom. Well, if she'd have any say in the matter, the power of the Dark Star would make all the difference.